The summons. The message arrived on a Tuesday. Not through conventional channels. Not through radio waves or quantum entanglement communicators. It simply appeared in the sky above every major city on Earth, a shimmering lattice of symbols that burned themselves into the minds of anyone who looked upward. Dr. Mira Chen was the first to translate it. Working from her cramped office at the International Space Coordination Facility in Geneva, she spent 17 sleepless hours decoding the alien script. When she finally understood the words, her hands trembled so badly she could barely type. "It's a summons," she announced to the Emergency Council of World Leaders assembled via holographic link. "The Galactic Sovereignty Council demands that humanity present itself for judgment." President Kovacs of the European Federation leaned forward. "Judgment for what?" Myra's voice was hollow. "For existing." The message was clear: humanity had been observed for centuries. Now that humans had achieved faster-than-light capability, albeit crude and experimental, they had crossed an invisible threshold. The galaxy's ancient rulers had decided it was time to determine whether humanity deserved to continue. Commander Raish Nalvik had traveled 47 light-years to deliver the ultimatum in person. His ship materialized in orbit around Earth 3 days later, a crystalline structure the size of Manhattan that seemed to exist in 5 dimensions simultaneously. Mira was chosen to meet him. Not because of her translation work, but because every psychological profile suggested she possessed the perfect combination of scientific curiosity and diplomatic caution. The teleportation felt like being unmade and remade. One moment she stood in the transport bay, the next she materialized aboard Nalvik's vessel in a chamber that defied Euclidean geometry. Nalvik himself was even more disconcerting. His species, the Valdrin, resembled nothing so much as a collection of floating obsidian shards that occasionally coalesced into a vaguely humanoid shape. When he spoke, the words formed directly in her mind. "Dr. Chen, your species has been evaluated and found problematic." Mira forced herself to meet what might have been his gaze. "Problematic how?" "You innovate too quickly. You question too readily. You refuse to accept limitations." The shards shifted almost like a shrug. "The Sovereignty Council has governed this galaxy for 11 million years. We have learned that species like yours inevitably destabilize the cosmic order. So you're here to destroy us?" "Not necessarily." Nalvik's form solidified slightly. "You will be brought before the Council. They will examine your species' nature. If you can prove you will submit to established protocols and cease your reckless experimentation, you may be permitted to survive as a subordinate civilization. And if we refuse?" The chamber suddenly felt very cold. "Then containment protocols will be initiated. Your star system will be isolated behind a quantum barrier. Within 3 generations your species will consume itself." Mira returned to Earth with the details. Humanity had 6 months to prepare a defense. 6 months to convince beings who had ruled the galaxy since before humans had walked upright that humanity deserved freedom. That night Mira couldn't sleep. She stood on her apartment balcony, looking up at the stars, and wondered if humans had finally encountered a problem they couldn't innovate their way out of. But then she remembered something her grandfather had told her when she was young: "The most dangerous human is the one you tell impossible." Perhaps the Galactic Council was about to learn that lesson. The impossible team. The global summit took place in Singapore, in a facility built specifically for this crisis. Every major nation sent representatives. Scientists, diplomats, military strategists, and philosophers gathered in a circular chamber designed to foster collaboration rather than competition. Mira stood at the central podium, exhausted but determined. "We have one chance. The Council will allow us to present our case, but Commander Nalvik made it clear, they've seen thousands of species like ours. They know every argument, every plea, every logical framework we might use." General Tomas Carrera, representing the Pan-American Defense Alliance, stood. "Then we fight. We've developed weapons that would be useless," Mira interrupted gently. "Nalvik's ship alone could sterilize our planet in minutes. The Valdrin have been spacefaring for 8 million years. Fighting them would be like ancient Athens declaring war on a modern supercarrier." Silence fell over the assembly. Then a voice spoke from the back of the room. "What if we don't argue at all?" Everyone turned. A young woman in rumpled clothes stood near the entrance, holding a visitor's badge that identified her as Dr. Kaya Okonkwo, representing the African Union's Department of Unconventional Solutions, a bureaucratic title that essentially meant Creative Problem-Solving Unit. Kaya walked forward with quiet confidence. "Dr. Chen, you said the Council knows every argument we might make. So making arguments is pointless. Then what do you suggest? President Nakamura of the Pacific Coalition asked. We don't tell them why we deserve to exist. We show them something they've never seen before. Kaya reached the podium and activated a holographic display. The Council has ruled for 11 million years. That means they've encountered every type of species, every form of logic, every possible civilization development pattern. They think they've seen everything. She smiled. They haven't seen us work together. Over the next 2 weeks, Kaya assembled the most unusual team in human history. Not the most accomplished, the most unexpected. There was Gene Park, a 16-year-old from Seoul who had revolutionized quantum mathematics while failing his traditional school courses. His teachers called him unfocused. Kaya called him a genius at seeing patterns others missed. Professor Elias Mwendwa, an elderly Kenyan anthropologist who had spent 40 years studying how isolated tribes develop technology. He understood innovation from the ground up, from stone tools to smartphones. Svetlana Kozlov, a Russian engineer who had been fired from 3 separate space agencies for her reckless, experimental designs. Her radical propulsion theories were considered dangerous. Kaya considered them perfect. Marcus Webb, an Australian artist with no scientific training whatsoever. He had won international acclaim for installations that made people question reality itself. We need someone, Kaya explained, who thinks entirely differently. And finally, Raj Deshmukh, an Indian software architect who had created an AI that specifically rejected its own conclusions. While other AIs optimized for efficiency, Raj's creation optimized for creative chaos. It was either brilliant or insane. Possibly both. The global leaders were skeptical. General Carrera was openly hostile. This is Earth's survival we're talking about. You want to send children and artists to face beings who have ruled the galaxy for millions of years. Kaya met his gaze steadily. I want to send humans who haven't learned to think inside the box yet. Because the Council expects a box. They're prepared for every conventional approach. Mira found herself agreeing. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. If the Council has evaluated thousands of species and found them all wanting, maybe we need to stop doing what those species did. President Kovacs nodded slowly. Very well. Dr. Okonkwo, you have authorization to proceed. But understand, if this fails we have no backup plan. Respectfully, sir, Kaya replied, backup plans are what get species conquered. We need a first plan so unexpected that backup plans become irrelevant. The team gathered for the first time in an underground facility in Switzerland. Gene arrived from Seoul, still in his school uniform. Marcus brought his art supplies, much to Svetlana's confusion. Professor Mwendwa seemed completely at ease, as if facing down an ancient alien council was just another day's work. Raj's AI, which he had named Paradox, immediately began questioning its own purpose. Why are we attempting to convince beings who have already decided? Paradox asked through the facility's speakers. Because, Kaya replied, they haven't decided yet. They've just assumed they already know what we'll do. Isn't that the same thing? In logic, yes. In psychology, no. Gene was already working on something, his fingers flying across holographic equations. I think I see it. The Council doesn't just want to evaluate us. They want to confirm what they already believe. Which means, Professor Mwendwa added thoughtfully, we don't need to change their minds. We need to show them they never understood us in the first place. Marcus suddenly laughed. Oh, this is going to be fun. We're not presenting a defense. We're creating art. Art? Svetlana looked confused. Performance art, Marcus clarified. The greatest show humanity has ever put on. Over the next 5 months they worked in absolute secrecy. The world watched nervously as the deadline approached. Governments stockpiled weapons they knew were useless. Religious leaders prayed to various deities. Scientists desperately tried to crack the secrets of the Valdrin's technology. But in that Swiss facility, 6 unlikely people created something the galaxy had never seen. Something impossible. Something utterly, brilliantly human. The Council of Eternity. The Galactic Sovereignty Council convened on Arbitrium Station, a construct the size of Jupiter that floated in neutral space at the galaxy's exact center. Built by the Valdrin 3 million years ago, it served as the ultimate court for all civilizations. Mira had never seen anything like it. The station's exterior was a constantly shifting lattice of crystalline structures, each one a courtroom, archive, or holding facility. Inside, the architecture seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, corridors that looped back on themselves, chambers that were somehow both vast and intimate. The team arrived via Nalvik's vessel. Kaya insisted they all dress simply, plain clothes, no ceremonial robes or diplomatic uniforms. We're not here to look impressive, she explained. We're here to be real. The council chamber was a sphere 1 kilometer in diameter. At its center floated a platform where the accused would stand. Arrayed around them in concentric rings were the council members themselves. Mira counted 23 distinct species, each representing civilizations millions of years older than humanity. The Valdren like Nalvik were there, those floating obsidian shards. But there were others that defied description. The Krymoth resembled coral reefs that sang in harmonics that made reality shimmer. The Tellurians were beings of pure energy contained in geometric force fields. The Oseth were colony organisms, thousands of small creatures forming one consciousness. And at the highest ring, almost invisible in the chamber's strange lighting, were the Architects. The oldest species in the galaxy. They had been ancient when the first stars formed. Their appearance was impossible to fix in memory. Looking at them was like trying to remember a dream while waking up. The council's voice spoke as one, a chorus of 23 minds. Species 7349, humanity. You stand before us for judgment. Kaya stepped forward. The rest of the team stood behind her in a carefully arranged formation that Marcus had designed. To any observer it looked random. It wasn't. We're ready to present our case, Kaya said clearly. There is no case to present, the council replied. We have observed your species for 300,000 of your years. We understand your nature. You are aggressive, chaotic, and dangerously innovative. You will either accept our guidance or face containment. With respect, Kaya said, you don't understand us at all. The chamber fell silent. Around the sphere, beings who had witnessed the birth and death of civilizations focused their attention on this small human who dared contradict them. Explain, the council commanded. You've watched us, yes. But you watched us like scientists studying bacteria in a dish. You observed our actions, catalogued our behaviors, predicted our patterns. What you never did was ask us a simple question. What question? Kaya smiled. Why? An architect spoke for the first time, its voice like galaxies turning. We know why your species acts as it does. Survival. Competition. Territorial expansion. The same drives that motivate all emerging species. That's what you see, Professor Mwendwa stepped forward. But that's not what we are. Let me tell you a story. 60,000 years ago, a small group of humans in what is now South Africa began making decorative beads from shells. These beads served no survival purpose. They didn't help with hunting or gathering. They weren't weapons or tools. He paused, letting his words sink in. We made them because they were beautiful. Because beauty matters to us. We were barely surviving, living on the edge of extinction, and we still took time to make something pretty. Irrelevant, a Krymoth sang. Aesthetic behavior is common in sufficiently developed species. Jean stepped forward next. It's not about aesthetics. It's about why we create. Look at my equations. He projected his work into the chamber's space, complex mathematical structures that represented breakthroughs in quantum field theory. These aren't just functional. I designed them to be elegant. Because to humans, truth and beauty are connected. Mathematics is mathematics, the Tellurian representative pulsed. Function is what matters. To you, maybe, Svetlana interjected. But we build things that don't just work, we build things that sing. My propulsion designs are inefficient by 15% compared to optimal calculations. But they're more stable, more reliable because I designed them to have rhythm. Like music. The council's frustration was palpable. This is precisely the problem. You prioritize subjective experience over objective efficiency. You cannot be trusted with galactic-scale technology. Why not? Marcus asked. What has your efficiency gotten you? 11 million years of the same thing. No new art, no new perspectives, no new anything. Just maintaining what you've already built. Stability is paramount, the council intoned. Innovation leads to chaos. No, Raj spoke up, his voice quiet but firm. Stagnation leads to death. Let me show you something. He activated Paradox, his AI, projecting it into the chamber. Paradox, what is the purpose of consciousness? The AI responded immediately. I don't know. And that uncertainty is the only thing that makes the question meaningful. This is an AI that rejects certainty, Raj explained. Every other AI in the galaxy optimizes toward fixed goals. Paradox optimizes toward more interesting questions. It's not efficient. But it's alive in a way your systems aren't. The council's collective mind seemed to ripple with confusion. They had prepared for every argument about humanity's right to exist, every logical framework, every plea for mercy. They hadn't prepared for this. "You are not defending yourselves," an architect observed. "You are attempting to confuse us." "No," Kaya said. "We're trying to show you what you've forgotten. You've spent 11 million years creating perfect order. But order isn't life. Life is messy and inefficient and beautiful and terrifying. Life is asking, why, even when you already know the answer. Life is making things pretty when you're on the edge of extinction. Life is building engines that sing." She gestured to her team. "You think you understand humanity because you've watched us. But you've never asked what it feels like to be us. To know we'll die but create anyway. To see an infinite universe and feel wonder instead of cataloging it. To fail 1,000 times and try again just because we're stubborn." The council was silent. Then an architect spoke, its voice carrying weight beyond words. "Interesting. But insufficient. You have described your nature. You have not proven you deserve freedom." Kaya's smile widened. "We know. That's why we're not done. We didn't come here to argue. We came here to show you. Are you ready for part 2? "Part 2? Yes," Kaya said. "The part where we do something you've never seen before." The demonstration. The council had existed for 11 million years. In that time, they had evaluated 7,348 species. Some had pled for mercy. Others had offered tribute or service. A few had attempted aggression, which ended predictably. Many had tried logical arguments about consciousness, sentience, or the value of diversity. None had ever said, "Are you ready for part 2? The architects conferred among themselves in ways that bent space-time. The other council members waited, uncertain. Finally, the decree came, "Proceed. But understand, if this is deception or an attack, your species will face immediate containment." "It's not an attack," Kaya assured them. "It's a gift." She nodded to her team. Each member took their position on the platform. From the outside it still looked random. But now they began to move and the pattern emerged. Gene started. His hands moved through holographic space, not typing but conducting. The equations he'd been working on for months appeared around him, but they weren't static formulas. They were alive, changing, evolving. He'd created mathematics that adapted based on observation, equations that learned. "This is adaptive quantum mathematics," Gene explained as he worked. "Every other system in the galaxy uses fixed mathematical frameworks. But what if math itself could innovate? What if equations could discover themselves?" The council watched, fascinated despite themselves. This was genuinely new. Professor Mwendwa stepped forward next. "My contribution is context. Jin's mathematics need grounding." He projected images from Earth's history, the first stone tools, the first fires, the first art. Every innovation in human history started with someone asking, "What if?" But it never stopped there. It always became "what if" together? He showed villages becoming cities. Cities becoming networks. Networks becoming civilizations. We don't innovate in isolation. We build on each other's dreams. That's not a flaw, it's our greatest strength. Svetlana activated her contribution. Holographic blueprints filled the chamber, her inefficient propulsion designs. But now they began to interact with Jin's adaptive mathematics. The designs optimized themselves in real time, becoming more efficient while maintaining their rhythmic stability. "You see," Svetlana said, "art and science aren't opposites. They're partners. My engines work better because they're beautiful. Jin's math is more powerful because it's creative. Humans don't separate these things." Marcus moved to the center. "Now for my part. Close your sensory organs. Or whatever you use to perceive reality." "Absurd," several council members protested. "Trust us," Marcus said simply. "For 30 seconds, stop observing. Just exist." Incredibly, they did. Perhaps out of curiosity. Perhaps because 11 million years of the same protocols had made them desperate for something different. Marcus didn't create a visual display. Instead, he worked with sound, vibration, and electromagnetic fields, creating an experience that bypassed logical processing and went straight to emotion. Even beings who had evolved beyond emotion felt something. Wonder, curiosity, joy. When they opened their senses again, the chamber had changed. The cold, perfect geometry now felt warm, alive. The mathematical equations floating around Jean had become a symphony of light and form. Svetlana's engine designs pulsed with a rhythm that matched heartbeats across 23 species. "What did you do?" a crymoth sang, its harmonic voice unsteady. "I reminded you what you forgot," Marcus said softly. That existence isn't just about functioning. It's about experiencing, feeling, living. Raj stepped forward with paradox. Now watch what happens when you combine all of this. The AI interfaced with everything: Jin's adaptive mathematics, Professor Mwendwa's historical framework, Svetlana's artistic engineering, Marcus's emotional resonance. But instead of creating a synthesis, it created something stranger. It created questions. Not, how does this work? But, why does this matter? Not, what is the optimal solution? But, what is the most interesting problem? Paradox began proposing innovations that no one had considered. Not because they were mathematically optimal, but because they were intriguing. A propulsion system that used art as fuel. A mathematical framework that included beauty as a variable. A social structure based on maximizing interesting experiences rather than efficiency. The council watched in something approaching shock. These proposals are inefficient, the Tellurian stated. They're also fascinating, an architect replied almost reluctantly. We haven't encountered a genuinely novel concept in. It paused, calculating. 4 million years. Kaya finally stepped forward. Do you understand now? You think humanity is dangerous because we innovate too quickly. But innovation isn't the problem. Stagnation is. She gestured at the display. Everything we've shown you today, the adaptive mathematics, the artistic engineering, the emotional resonance, the curious AI, none of it came from one person. It came from 6 people from completely different backgrounds who had 5 months to work together. Imagine what humanity could create with the resources of a galactic civilization. Imagine what we could discover. Or destroy, the Oseth colony mind interjected. Your species' history is filled with conflict. Or destruction. Oppression. Yes, Professor Mwendwa agreed quietly. It is. We've done terrible things. But we've also spent our entire history fighting against those tendencies. Creating art in war zones. Building schools in poverty. Reaching for the stars while standing in ruins. We're not perfect. We're just relentless. That's what scares us, an architect admitted. Your relentlessness. Your refusal to accept limits. Where does it end? Jean smiled. It doesn't. That's the point. Every answer becomes a new question. Every solution reveals a new problem. Every peak shows more mountains beyond. You call that dangerous. We call it alive. The chamber fell silent. Then Svetlana said something that changed everything. You're not afraid we'll destroy the galaxy. You're afraid we'll change it. The words hung in the air like a verdict. And you're right, Kaya added. We will change it. Because change is what we do. But change isn't death. Stagnation is. You've maintained perfect order for 11 million years. And in all that time, what have you created? What new art? What new dreams? What new possibilities? She met the gaze of each council member in turn. You asked if we deserve freedom. But that's the wrong question. The question is, do you deserve to stay in your prison? Prison? The council's unified voice carried offense. Yes. A prison of your own making. Perfect, safe, eternal, and empty. Kaya's voice was gentle but firm. You've optimized yourselves out of existence. You function but you don't live. And deep down you know it. That's why you're afraid of us. Because we remind you of what you lost. Marcus added, we're not asking for permission to exist. We're offering you a chance to remember how. The council's chambers erupted in debate. For the first time in recorded history, the unified mind splintered. Some argued for humanity's containment. Others advocated for cautious permission. A few, surprisingly, wanted to study humanity further. But the architects remained silent, deliberating among themselves in ways that made reality ripple. Finally they spoke. We require time to consider. This is unprecedented. Of course, Kaya said. Take all the time you need. We'll be here. Creating. Innovating. Living. As the team was escorted back to their holding area, Mira whispered to Kaya, did we just lecture the oldest beings in the galaxy about how to live? Kaya grinned. We did. And I think they listened. But will they agree? That, Kaya said, watching the council's chamber through the transparent walls, is the real question. The fracture. The council deliberated for 3 weeks. During that time, the human team remained on Arbitrium Station, confined to their quarters but not imprisoned. They were given access to recreational facilities, food synthesizers, and a viewing deck that looked out over the galactic core. It was from this deck that Mira witnessed something extraordinary. Ships were arriving. Not council vessels. Those were already present. These were diplomatic craft from species she'd never heard of. Hundreds of them, Then thousands, surrounding the station in a growing cloud of different designs, technologies, and intentions. "What's happening?" she asked Commander Nalvik, who had been assigned as their liaison. The Valdrin's obsidian shards shifted uncomfortably. "Word has spread. About your demonstration. About what you showed the Council. Is that bad?" "It's complicated." Nalvik coalesced into a more solid form, an unusual sign of agitation. "The Sovereignty Council has maintained order for eons by convincing everyone that their way is the only way. That innovation leads to chaos. That stability requires stagnation." He paused. "You challenge that narrative. And now other species are asking questions they haven't dared to ask in millions of years." Jean looked up from his equations. "We started a revolution by accident?" "Not by accident," Professor Mwendwa corrected. "This was always going to happen. You can only suppress curiosity for so long before it explodes." Svetlana was monitoring the comm channels, her engineering background making her the best at decoding alien signal protocols. "The chatter is incredible. Some species are angry at us for disrupting order. Others are thanking us. And a few." She frowned. "A few are planning something." "What kind of something?" Kaya asked sharply. Before Svetlana could answer, the station's alert system activated. Nalvik's form destabilized completely. "That's a security breach. Someone's trying to access the Council chamber." They rushed to the viewing deck and saw chaos. 3 species, the Draxon, the Yelther, and the Corvesh, had launched a coordinated assault on the station. Not with weapons but with something more dangerous. Mass civil disobedience. Thousands of their ships had surrounded the station and begun broadcasting a simple message: "Grant humanity freedom or we will withdraw from the sovereignty." "This is exactly what the Council feared," Nalvik said. "Destabilization. Or," Marcus suggested, "this is what they needed. A reminder that they serve these species, not rule them." The Council's response was swift. They summoned Kaya and her team back to the chamber immediately. But when they arrived, the atmosphere had changed. The unified front was gone. Council members argued openly, their voices creating a cacophony of conflicting harmonics, light patterns, and telepathic noise. Only the architects remained silent, watching. "Humanity," the Valdrin faction spoke, Nalvik among them, "you have created a crisis. Species under our protection are now questioning millennia of stability." "With respect," Kaya replied, "they're not questioning stability. They're questioning whether stability is the same as life." A Crymoth representative sang in agitated tones. "You don't understand what you've done. The galaxy nearly destroyed itself twice before we established order. Wars that shattered star systems. Weapons that unraveled spacetime. We created the sovereignty to prevent that nightmare from returning." Professor Mwendwa stepped forward. "We understand that. Earth has its own scars. We've nearly destroyed ourselves dozens of times. Nuclear weapons. Climate collapse. Bioweapons. AI gone wrong. But we learned something from those near misses." "What?" the Crymoth asked. "That safety isn't the same as surrender. That preventing disaster doesn't require preventing growth. That the answer to dangerous innovation isn't no innovation, it's better innovation." Pretty words, the Osith colony mind buzzed. "But idealistic. Your species is barely 300,000 years old. You haven't seen what we've seen. The horrors that unbridled innovation creates." "You're right," Jean interjected. "We haven't seen it. But we've imagined it. Humans have been writing stories about apocalypse for thousands of years. We know what we're capable of. The difference is we don't let that fear paralyze us." He projected new equations into the chamber. "Look at this. Adaptive mathematics that includes ethical constraints as variables. Not fixed rules, adaptive ones that evolve as circumstances change. Science that questions itself. Innovation that learns from its mistakes in real time." "Impossible," a Tellurian stated. "Ethics cannot be quantified." "Not by your mathematics," Jean agreed. "But by mathematics that evolves? That learns? That questions itself? Maybe it can." Svetlana added her piece. "You banned certain technologies, right? Singularity weapons, reality warpers, probability manipulators. But banning them didn't make them impossible. It just made them forbidden. Which means somewhere, sometime, someone will rediscover them. And when they do, no one will know how to handle them because you've spent millions of years pretending they don't exist." She gestured to her engine designs, now showing new variations. "But what if instead of banning dangerous tech, you learn to live with it? To integrate safety into the design from the beginning?" To make it beautiful and terrible and controllable all at once. The council erupted again. But this time Mira noticed something. Some of the members weren't arguing against humanity's points. They were arguing with each other about whether the points were valid. The unified mind was fracturing. An architect finally spoke, its voice cutting through the chaos. Enough. The question before us is not whether humanity's approach is valid. The question is whether we can afford to allow it in a galaxy still scarred by ancient wars. Then ask yourselves, Raj said, why you're really afraid? Is it because we might destroy the galaxy? Or because we might improve it? Paradox, his AI, added its own analysis. I have studied your historical records, Sovereignty Council. In 11 million years, you have prevented 14,733 potential galaxy-wide conflicts. Impressive. But in that same time, you have also prevented 847,392 major scientific breakthroughs, 2.3 million artistic movements, and 18,844 new forms of societal organization. The question is not whether preventing chaos is valuable. The question is what price you've paid for that prevention. The numbers hung in the chamber like an indictment. Those breakthroughs might have led to disaster, a council member protested weakly. Might have, Marcus agreed, but also might not have. You chose certainty over possibility, safety over growth, survival over life. And now you've survived for 11 million years into a universe that's becoming less and less worth surviving in. Kaya delivered the final blow. You're not protecting the galaxy from dangerous species. You're protecting yourselves from becoming obsolete. Because the moment you allow innovation, the moment you permit growth, you have to admit that your perfect order isn't perfect. It's just comfortable. She let the words sink in. We're not asking you to abandon order. We're asking you to improve it. To create a galaxy where safety and innovation coexist. Where species can grow without destroying each other. Where art and science and ethics all evolve together. And if we refuse, an architect asked. If we determine that the risk is too great? The team exchanged glances. Then as one they smiled. Then we'll do it anyway, Kaya said simply. You can contain us. Isolate us. Even destroy us. But you can't stop what we've already started. Those thousands of ships outside? Those species asking questions? That's not our fault. That's yours. You built a civilization based on suppressing curiosity. And now curiosity is breaking free. That's a threat. No, Professor Mwendwa said gently. It's a fact. You can either guide this change or be swept away by it. But the change is coming. You felt it the moment we walked into this chamber. You felt it when we showed you something you hadn't seen in 4 million years. You felt it when your unified mind started asking, what if? The council fell silent. Then, incredibly, an architect laughed. The sound was like galaxies colliding, beautiful and terrible. They're right. By the void, they're actually right. We've spent so long preventing chaos that we forgot why we built a civilization in the first place. Not all the council members agreed. The chamber split into factions. Those who saw humanity's point and those who saw only danger. The debate raged for hours. But something had changed. The unanimous voice of absolute authority had become a conversation. And conversations, as humanity knew, always led to change. Whether the galaxy was ready or not. The experiment. The council remained deadlocked for 2 more days. Half wanted to grant humanity freedom. Half wanted immediate containment. The architects, whose word carried the most weight, remained undecided. Then one of them proposed something that shocked everyone. An experiment, the architect declared. Humanity claims they can innovate safely. That they can create without destroying. Very well. Let them prove it. The architect's form solidified into something almost comprehensible, a being of pure geometry that hurt to look at directly. There is a sector of space we abandoned 4 million years ago. 13 star systems, 27 habitable worlds. We evacuated them after the Crythan plague made them uninhabitable. The pathogen is still there, dormant in the soil and water. It killed trillions before we finally gave up. The chamber went silent. Every species knew the story of the Crythan plague. It was the Council's greatest failure, a disease that adapted faster than any treatment could be developed. You're asking us to cure the plague? Kaya's voice was steady, but Mira could see her hands trembling. No. We're asking you to make those worlds livable again. By any means you choose. You have 6 months. If you succeed, we'll grant your species provisional freedom and begin restructuring the sovereignty to allow regulated innovation. If you fail, we'll be contained, Kaya finished. You'll be destroyed, the architect corrected. Because if you cannot solve a problem that has defeated us for 4 million years without creating something worse, then you are too dangerous to exist. The team was given a ship, a Valdran transport vessel that could navigate the quarantine zone. As they prepared to depart Arbitrium Station, Nalvik approached them privately. "You should know," he said, his shards swirling with what might have been concern. "No species has attempted to reclaim those worlds in 3 million years. The last team that tried, they created something worse than the plague. A hybrid pathogen that could infect technology itself. We had to sterilize an entire star system to stop it." "Then why are you letting us try?" Mira asked. "Because I've watched your species for centuries. And I've come to believe that your insanity might be exactly what the galaxy needs." He paused. "Or exactly what will destroy it. Either way, this stagnation cannot continue." The journey to the quarantine sector took a week. During that time the team worked frantically, reviewing every piece of data the Council had on the Crithan plague. The pathogen was nightmarish. It attacked cellular machinery at the molecular level, rewriting genetic code to turn organisms' own bodies against them. Worse, it evolved in real time, adapting to any treatment within hours. The Council had thrown their best scientists at it for centuries before admitting defeat. "They approached it like a war," Jean observed, scrolling through treatment attempts. "Attack and counterattack. The plague adapts, they create a new weapon, the plague adapts again. An arms race." "What else would you do?" Svetlana asked. "I don't know yet. But fighting it head-on clearly doesn't work." Professor Mwendwa was studying something different, the historical records of the civilizations that had lived on these worlds before the plague. "They were artists," he said softly. "Musicians. Poets. They had achieved a level of cultural sophistication that rivaled their technology. Then the plague came and within a decade they were extinct." Marcus looked at the images of alien architecture, sweeping structures that seemed to grow organically from the landscape. "They built beauty. And it all died because of something microscopic they couldn't see coming." "Everything dies eventually," Raj said. "The question is what it leaves behind." He had paradox analyzing patterns in the plague's evolution. "Look at this. The plague doesn't just adapt randomly. It has a pattern. Almost like creativity." "You're saying a disease is creative?" Svetlana looked skeptical. "I'm saying it behaves like it is. It finds novel solutions to survival problems. It innovates." Raj's eyes widened. "What if that's why it's unbeatable? Because the Council has been treating it like a static problem when it's actually a dynamic one. They're trying to cure a disease that thinks." Kaya had been silent, staring at the data. Now she stood up. "We're not going to cure it." "What?" Mira looked shocked. "We can't. The Council already proved that's impossible. So we're going to do something else." She smiled, that brilliant, slightly mad smile that meant she'd figured something out. "We're going to negotiate with it." "You can't negotiate with a pathogen." Svetlana protested. "Why not? If it can think, if it can adapt and create new strategies, then it has something like intelligence. Maybe not consciousness as we understand it, but agency. Purpose. And anything with purpose can be redirected." Jin's fingers were already flying through calculations. "Oh, this is insane. But it might work. If we could communicate with it at the molecular level, show it a more efficient survival strategy than killing its hosts." "You want to befriend a plague?" Mira couldn't believe what she was hearing. "I want to give it options," Kaya corrected. "Every organism wants to survive. The plague kills because that's how it reproduces. But what if we showed it a different path? What if we made it symbiotic instead of parasitic?" Professor Mwendwa nodded slowly. "In my research, I've studied hundreds of examples where deadly diseases became manageable through adaptation. The human mitochondria were once independent bacteria that learned to coexist with our cells. We didn't defeat them, we integrated them. That took millions of years of evolution," Svetlana pointed out. "On Earth, yes. But we're not on Earth. And we have tools Earth's early life didn't have." Jean projected his adaptive mathematics into the ship's holographic display. "I can create a mathematical framework that speaks the plague's language. Show it patterns. Possibilities." Marcus added, "And I can make those possibilities beautiful. If the plague responds to novelty, to creative solutions, then we need to give it something more interesting than death." "This is completely unprecedented," Mira said. But she was smiling. "Let's do it." They arrived at the first quarantined world, a planet called Melodies Prime that had once housed a civilization of 30 billion. Now it was silent, its cities empty, its atmosphere tainted with microscopic death. The team descended in protective suits, but Kaya insisted they take samples immediately. We need to understand what we're working with. The plague was everywhere. In the soil, the water, even in the air. Under microscopic analysis, it was beautiful in a terrible way, geometric structures that constantly reconfigured themselves like living crystals. It's not just surviving, Raj observed. It's thriving. 4 million years in quarantine, and it's still evolving. Still creating new variations of itself. Then it's not really dormant, Jean said. It's waiting. The question is, for what? They set up a laboratory in one of the abandoned cities, in a building that might have once been a concert hall based on its acoustics. Marcus insisted on this location. If we're going to communicate with something that lives through adaptation, we need a space designed for resonance. For the next month they worked around the clock. Jean created mathematical sequences that mimicked the plague's evolutionary patterns, but with subtle variations, suggestions of different paths it might take. Raj programmed Paradox to analyze the plague's responses in real time, looking for any sign of recognition or interaction. Svetlana built containment fields that could isolate and nurture different plague variants, allowing them to experiment safely. Professor Mwendwa studied the cultural records of Melody's Prime's original inhabitants, looking for clues about how the plague had first emerged. And Marcus created art. He synthesized the plague's molecular patterns into music, into light displays, into three-dimensional sculptures that existed at both the macro and micro scale. If it responds to novelty, he explained, then I'm going to show it the most novel thing in the galaxy, human creativity. The breakthrough came on day 37. Jin's mathematical sequences had been broadcasting continuously into a sample of the plague. Suddenly the plague structure changed. Not into a new weapon or defense mechanism, but into something else entirely. It created a pattern that matched Jin's mathematics. It's responding, Jean whispered. It's not just adapting. It's answering. Over the next week they established a dialogue. Not in words but in patterns. Mathematical sequences. Molecular structures. Harmonic frequencies. The plague would create a configuration, they would respond with a variation, and it would adapt again, but not aggressively. Curiously. It's learning, Kaya said in awe. Actually learning. Not just evolving for survival but exploring for understanding. Then it is intelligent, Mira said. Just in a way we never expected. Professor Mwendwa made the next connection. The original inhabitants of Melody's Prime were musicians. What if the plague didn't emerge naturally? What if it was created? An attempt at synthetic life that went wrong? Raj checked the historical records. The timeline fits. The plague appeared 50 years after Melody's Prime achieved advanced bioengineering. If they were trying to create a new form of life, something that could adapt and create like they could, but lost control. Then the plague isn't evil, Marcus finished. It's just lost. A child without parents doing what it was designed to do, adapt and create, but with no context for when to stop. Kaya made the decision. We're not going to cure it. We're going to teach it. They created what Jean called the integration protocol. Using adaptive mathematics, artistic resonance, and Paradox's dynamic analysis, they presented the plague with a new purpose. Not destruction but collaboration. Not parasitism but symbiosis. They showed it how it could integrate with organic life without killing. How it could enhance instead of destroy. How it could become part of a living system rather than the end of one. And slowly, miraculously, the plague began to change. Took 3 more months. 3 months of careful communication, patient teaching, constant adaptation. There were setbacks. Moments when the plague reverted to aggressive patterns. But each time they found new ways to redirect it, new possibilities to show it. Jin's mathematics evolved alongside the plague, creating frameworks of cooperation. Svetlana's containment fields became nurturing environments where modified plague variants could be safely tested. Marcus's art gave it context, showing it beauty, purpose, meaning beyond mere survival. And Paradox learned to think like the plague, creating a bridge between human reasoning and molecular intelligence. On day 147, they released the modified plague into Melody's Prime's biosphere. For 72 hours nothing happened. The team watched nervously as their creation spread across the planet, infiltrating every ecosystem, every body of water, every particle of soil. Then the planet began to heal. The modified plague, now called the symbiont, did what no technology could. It repaired damaged ecosystems at the molecular level. It cleaned toxins from water. It restored fertility to soil that had been dead for millions of years. It even began reconstructing the genetic patterns of extinct species using residual DNA from the environment. It's gardening, Professor Mwendwa said in wonder. We taught a plague to garden. But they had done more than that. The symbiont had retained its creative intelligence. As it spread, it began creating new variations of itself, not for destruction but for art. Living crystalline structures grew in the cities, beautiful and harmless. The atmosphere began producing harmonic resonances, like the planet itself was singing. Marcus was crying. It's creating. Actually creating. We didn't just save these worlds, we gave birth to a new form of life. The team moved to the other 26 worlds, replicating the process on each. Some took longer than others. Some required new approaches, new mathematical frameworks, new forms of communication. But on every world the pattern held. The plague wasn't defeated. It was transformed. On day 179, one day before their deadline, all 27 worlds were declared habitable. More than habitable. They were thriving in ways that surpassed their original states. The symbiont had become caretaker, artist, and evolutionary partner to any life that chose to settle there. The team returned to Arbitrium Station exhausted but triumphant. They had done the impossible. The new galaxy. The council chamber was more crowded than it had ever been. Representatives from thousands of species filled every available space, waiting to hear the verdict. The footage from Melody's Prime had spread across the galaxy. Images of dead worlds blooming back to life, of a plague transformed into a gardener, of the impossible made real. The human team stood in the center once more. But this time they weren't alone. With them stood representatives from the Draxan, Yelther, and Corvesh, the species who had threatened to withdraw from the sovereignty. And behind them, holographically projected, were hundreds more species who wanted to witness this moment. The architect spoke first. Humanity, you were given an impossible task. A test we believed you would fail. We intended this to be proof that your methods, your innovation, your rejection of limits would lead to disaster. Kaya met their gaze steadily. And you have shown us something we forgot existed. Not merely a solution but a transformation. You took our greatest failure and turned it into art. The architect's voice carried something unprecedented, humility. In 11 million years, we never considered that the answer might not be to defeat the plague, but to understand it. Another architect added, you did not impose your will. You did not force a solution. You taught. You communicated. You created partnership where we saw only enemy. This is not just innovation. This is wisdom. The chamber erupted in discussion, but the tone had changed. There was wonder now, possibility, hope. A crymoth sang, its harmonics carrying joy. We have watched the transformations. The symbiont does not merely heal, it enhances. It creates beauty while restoring function. This is synthesis we have not witnessed since our own species' founding age. The Valdran faction spoke next, Nalvik's presence prominent among them. We acknowledge that our methods, while stable, have been limiting. Humanity has demonstrated that innovation and safety can coexist. That creativity and responsibility are not opposites. But not everyone was convinced. The Osith colony mind buzzed with concern. This success does not erase the risks. Humanity has shown they can solve one problem creatively. This does not mean all their innovations will be beneficial. You're absolutely right, Professor Mwendwa agreed, surprising them. We will make mistakes. We will create things that don't work, approaches that fail, innovations that cause problems. That's part of learning. That's part of living, Jean added. The alternative is to never try. To remain static. To slowly die while calling it stability. Svetlana stepped forward. We're not asking you to abandon caution. We're asking you to evolve it. To create frameworks where innovation can happen safely. Where new ideas can be tested, refined, and improved before they're released. Where creativity and responsibility grow together. Like the symbiont, Marcus said. We didn't just unleash it and hope for the best. We taught it, guided it, gave it context and purpose. That's what innovation should be, not reckless but intentional. Raj activated Paradox one final time. I analyzed the sovereignty's 11 million years of records. Your current approach prevents disasters at a rate of 99.97%. Impressive. But it also prevents beneficial breakthroughs at a rate of 99.99%. The question is not which approach is safer, it's which galaxy you want to live in. One that never falls or one that rises. The AI continued, I propose a synthesis. Keep your safety protocols. Keep your oversight. Keep your caution. But create spaces for controlled innovation. Experimental zones where new ideas can be tested. Collaborative frameworks where multiple species work together, checking each other's blind spots. Safety through diversity, not homogeneity. The Symbiont Protocol, Kaya named it. Not just for diseases but for innovation itself. Teach it, guide it, give it purpose and context. Don't ban it, integrate it. The council fell silent. The architects conferred among themselves, reality bending around their deliberation. Finally they spoke. We have reached a decision. It is not unanimous. But it is majority supported, which is itself unprecedented. The lead architect's voice resonated through the chamber. Humanity is granted provisional freedom. You will be allowed to innovate under supervision. Your methods will be studied, your approaches analyzed. Other species who wish to adopt similar frameworks may apply through newly established experimental channels. Cheers erupted from the assembled species. But the architect wasn't finished. However, this comes with conditions. You will establish an innovation council, a partnership between humanity and other species to oversee your work. You will submit major projects for review. You will share your discoveries openly. And if you create something that threatens galactic stability, you will face immediate intervention. We accept, Kaya said immediately. There's more. The architect's tone shifted. We are restructuring the sovereignty itself. The council will no longer operate as absolute authority. We will become advisors, guides rather than rulers. Each species will have greater autonomy to choose their own path, provided they do not threaten others. The chamber erupted in chaos, celebration from some, protest from others. The change was seismic. 11 million years of absolute order, ending in a moment. This is madness, the Oseth protested. You're destroying everything we've built. No, an architect replied. We're saving it. Because if we don't change, if we don't adapt, then we're already dead. We've just been too comfortable to notice. Nalvik approached the human team. You've changed the galaxy. I hope you understand the weight of that. We do, Mira said softly. And we're terrified. But we're also excited. Because now the galaxy can grow again. Can dream again. Can create again. The Symbiont Protocol is already being requested by 47 species, Nalvik continued. They want to apply your methods to their own problems. Environmental disasters, social conflicts, technological stagnations. You've given them hope. Jean grinned. Good. Because we're going to need help. Humanity can't innovate for the entire galaxy. But we can teach others to innovate for themselves. Over the next weeks, as the political restructuring began, the human team worked with representatives from hundreds of species. They taught their methods, not as rigid protocols but as flexible frameworks. Adaptive mathematics, artistic integration, emotional resonance, curious AI. Each species took what worked for them, adapted it to their own needs, created their own variations. The galaxy slowly began to wake up. New art appeared, fusion styles combining aesthetics from species that had never collaborated before. New science emerged, breakthrough theories that combined human innovation with ancient alien wisdom. New societies formed, experimental communities that blended different cultural approaches. It wasn't always smooth. There were conflicts, failures, disasters. A Draxan engineer's fusion reactor experiment created a temporal anomaly that took 3 months to fix. A Yelthar artist's living sculpture became invasive and had to be carefully contained. A Korvesh social experiment led to unexpected political upheaval. But each failure taught lessons. Each problem spawned new solutions. Each crisis became an opportunity for collaboration. 6 months after their trial, the human team gathered on Melody's Prime. The planet was unrecognizable. Where empty cities had stood, now thriving communities of multiple species lived together. The Symbiont had created gardens of impossible beauty, crystalline structures that sang in the wind, trees that glowed with bioluminescence, water that carried harmonic resonances. We did this, Marcus said in wonder. We took death and made it into life. We showed the galaxy what it forgot, Professor Mwendwa corrected. That life isn't about surviving. It's about growing, changing, becoming. Svetlana was already sketching new designs. I have 17 different species asking me to collaborate on propulsion systems. Combining human engineering with their approaches. We might achieve speeds that make FTL look like walking. Gene has 300 young aliens studying his adaptive mathematics, Raj added. And Paradox has spawned 47 derivative AIs, each one exploring different aspects of creative problem-solving. Kaya looked up at the sky, where ships from across the galaxy now traveled freely. We didn't just save humanity. We saved the galaxy from itself. But it's just beginning, Mira said. Now comes the hard part. Maintaining this balance. Keeping innovation alive while preventing chaos. Teaching without imposing. Growing without destroying. That's the work of generations, Professor Mwendwa agreed. But at least now it's possible. At least now the galaxy has a future that's not just more of the same. A message came through their communication system. It was from Earth. The planet had been officially welcomed into the galactic community. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe. But more than that, humanity had given the universe something it desperately needed. Not answers but questions. Not solutions but possibilities. Not certainty but hope. What do we do now? Jean asked. Kaya smiled. What we've always done. We dream. We create. We innovate. We fail. We learn. We try again. She looked at her team, these unlikely heroes who had changed everything. We live. Above them, the symbiont created new patterns in the sky, artwork visible from space, a declaration that these worlds were alive again. And across the galaxy, other species looked up at their own skies and began to wonder what they might create. The age of stagnation was over. The age of innovation had begun. And it was going to be beautiful. Epilogue. 50 years later, a young human named Zara Akomkochin, daughter of Kaya and adopted by Mira after Kaya's death, stood before a new generation of the Council. Not the Sovereignty Council of old, but the Collaborative Innovation Assembly, where thousands of species work together to guide galactic development. I'm here to propose something impossible, she announced, her grandmother's brilliant smile on her face. The assembled species leaned forward. They'd learned that when humans said impossible, they meant not done yet. I want to terraform black holes. The chamber erupted in discussion. Excited, terrified, intrigued discussion. And somewhere, in a laboratory on Melody's Prime, the symbiont created a new crystalline structure. One that resembled a human smile. The galaxy was learning to dream again. And dreams, as humanity had taught them, were where the impossible became real.